This week on the Road Unfiltered podcast, we have photographer John Shearer, who has worked with Taylor Swift. He shoots the Grammys, he shoots the Oscars, he shoots the Met Gala, and so much more. Welcome, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So, you and I have talked to each other on Instagram and text messages. We went and had lunch together. And, just I want to know a little bit more about you and just kind of how you got into this. And, I think we're both from LA, right?
Right.
Are you born and raised in LA?
Riverside, an hour out of LA.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Woodland Hills.
Yeah.
So the LA hat's perfect.
Yeah. So I went to school in San Francisco. I went to school for photojournalism, actually, because in the late 90s, that was a booming career, I guess. While I was in school, I think newspapers kind of started crashing and laying off their photo staffs and everything. But at the time, I thought I'd be photographing news and sports and conflict and protests and everything.
Right.
But that career path it became clear that it wasn't a feasible career path, around 2000, because, like I said, newspapers, like the Tennessean used to have 18 staff photographers. Now they have 2, and those 2 photographers do still photography and audio and video and kind of have to do everything. So, and everyone that works at newspapers is worried they're going to get laid off the next weekly meeting. So anyway, that's how I transitioned into entertainment.
How long have you been in Nashville for?
9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Coming up on 9. Yeah.
And you've been doing this for how long now?
25 years, honestly.
Wow.
I mean, I started when I was, 17, 18.
And that was all in LA?
It was in LA. Yeah. And actually, when I started, I was really into like the skate scene. So I'd shoot punk rock bands and skateboarding and surfing and snowboarding.
Nice.
I loved all that. I loved going into North Shore and photographing surfing, and I loved being a part of the scene. I just wasn't good at actually surfing,
right?
So, or that good at skateboarding or that good at snowboarding. But I loved being around all of it. My friends did as well. So I think photography's kind of just kept me in that world. That's kind of what was one of the reasons I picked up a camera. Just started taking photos of friends and stuff, and it would enable me to continue going on these trips with surfers to Hawaii and things like that, even though I had no business getting in the water.
That's wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you don't surf or skate or anything?
I did all of it. I just wasn't particularly good at any of it.
Right.
So, I had no business hanging out with these guys on Warped Tour or whatever, unless I was there in like a work capacity, right?
Right.
So, but Warped Tour is kind of where I really started shooting music and entertainment and stuff.
Gotcha.
I went for the skateboarding, ended up shooting NoFX and Bad Religion and Rancid and all those bands that were headlining that year, and kind of fell in love, got the bug for music photography.
Man, that's really cool.
I think that was 97, 98.
Wow. And what an era too.
Yeah.
Of music.
It was, and I think all these sports kind of drew their own genres of music. There was surf rock, or if you were into skateboarding, there were all the punk bands I kind of mentioned, and that really, up until that point, I don't know that any sport had sort of generated its own genre of music that was associated or tied to it. And maybe even to this day, that might be the case, other than the board sports, really, I guess, right?
That's interesting. I've never thought of it like that.
But it's kind of like if you're a skater in the 90s, you listen to NoFX or whatever. That was just kind of part of it. Yeah. There's no other sport that's really necessarily like that, I don't think.
Yeah. So the Warped Tour stuff, I mean, when you went out, did you tour at all in that, or was it just kind of local to LA?
In the beginning, I was just shooting local shows. I did in 2001 do maybe a week on Warped Tour with a band called The Explosion, a punk rock band. And that was like 9 of us on the floor of a Sprinter van, kind of, just sleeping on the floor of a van, and then sometimes get a hotel room. And when I say that, I mean like a hotel room, for like 8 or 9 guys, like the band would share the beds, and like we would sleep on the floor.
Right.
And it was tons of fun, honestly.
Was there any like documentation of that too? Any photography from those moments?
Sure. Yeah. If I can find the film, and figure out how to scan it. Yeah.
Wow. So back then, I mean, obviously 90, 97, 98, you were talking about, I mean, everything, it was film.
Yeah.
What did you use then, camera-wise?
Let's see. I guess I would have been using Canon EOS 1Ns, like with skating and with all that stuff, it was always a fisheye lens, like with punk rock and skateboarding and all that. Yeah. But it was all Canon film gear. Yeah.
It's kind of funny you say that with the fisheye lenses, and back in the 90s like that. Some of my favorite videos, music videos back then were like Beastie Boys videos.
And those all shot on fisheye lens.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that stuff is so like ahead, it was so ahead of its time at the time, and it was so cool and so unique. And there's just those like really low angles and the all that made them look so big. It was so inspiring. I loved that look back then.
And then I ultimately, like, the Leica M6 was my favorite camera I ever owned, and kind of inspires me still to this day with the Leicas that I like to shoot with, that we can talk about later. That was my favorite camera. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's very cool.
I still use it once in a while. A lot of artists now think you're artistic if you shoot film because they didn't grow up.
Right.
They didn't grow up shooting film. So it's kind of a novelty to them. It's like buying vinyl now, instead of streaming music.
Very true.
You can go to Third Man Records and press vinyl or process film. It's kind of like the same retro kind of.
Yeah.
So there's still some artists that request film. And I remember one of the ones I did recently, I just hadn't done it in so long. Half the film just came out like blank because it wasn't loaded properly in the camera, and my techs aren't used to loading film, and it's just not part of our workflow for the last 20 years.
Exactly.
So, and people forget that stuff happened. There's light leaks, or it could just be loaded wrong, and you have an entirely blank roll. Did you start shooting film?
No, I was on the outer edge of that, because when I started back in 2004, I was shooting more video.
Right.
I was doing more
when I was digital at that time.
It was still tape. It was I got into digital with the Panasonic HVX 200, and I had that out on the road with me when I was out with Keith Urban, and I was with Keith Urban between 2005 and 2009, I think it was. 2000, end of 2009. And but I was shooting more that. And then I moved to a Canon 5D, and then started shooting more video with that. So I never got into the film thing. I felt like I was just like right on the back end of it.
Yeah.
Right when everything was kind of flipping over.
I didn't really print, but I was kind of at the point in college where we'd process our own film in like a wet film lab and then scan it. We weren't printing. It was right in the middle. And I got my first digital camera, which was the it's just a Canon 1D, right?
Yeah.
Was the original one. Like a few megapixel or something like that. But my photojournalism professor at the time didn't even want me using it because nobody knew if it was going to be like a passing trend or what. Although I think in the end, learning to shoot on film and learning that process is actually beneficial.
100%. 100%. I've heard that a lot.
To learn to do it that way and then, because now with digital, it's so instant gratification and, whether, if you're talking about exposure or film speeds or whatever, you can see your frame, so you can adjust it right there, and you never really learn how to do it organically, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, very true. That's very true.
You kind of have to shoot film to actually learn how to screw up an exposure and ruin a shoot, and it's not forgiving. And
exactly. And that's the trial and error. I feel like that a lot of people don't have these days, because like you said, it's like you could take a photo and then you could look at it and go, oh, that's wrong, let's do it again.
Right.
And it's completely adjusted, and then it's right. But I feel like there's something about film that is just, I don't know, it's just so right.
And especially if you're talking about studio work and lighting and ratios and exposures, and you really have to get it right with digital. You're probably not using a light meter anymore. You're just, you're not using a light meter to balance out the lights. You're just looking at the camera and seeing what needs to be turned up or down. So in order to really learn how to use lights, you kind of had to shoot film when you didn't have the instant gratification to find out you've screwed up the exposure. Right? So
it's really funny, because we were just talking to somebody about this, that like people these days that just pick up a camera and go, and they think that they're a DP and a photographer off the bat. It's like these days they don't have what you went through back then of having to learn like from a mistake, and I find that so much more unique to a style. You know what I mean? I just feel like with the film and everything, and where you came from and where you are now, but like kids these days, or people that are getting into it these days, I always say kids these days, but it's everybody. But, I feel like there is room for error, but it's so quick. You could quickly fix it.
Absolutely.
You know? And it doesn't like, when you go and you develop something and something is not right, then you learn from that, and it takes days and days and days. But I don't know. I feel like the learning curve is quicker these days in a way, but
it is. Another thing that was interesting back then, if you wanted to photograph a band or, figure out how to get in touch with them, we didn't just have, the internet or, those types of resources at our fingertips. So it's like if one of these bands was coming to town, you'd go to like Tower Records or Warehouse, buy the CD, look at what label they're on,
Oh, wow.
because you wouldn't have that, you wouldn't have a computer with that information in front of you. So you'd have to actually go buy the album, look at what label they're on, and call the label and try and find the right contacts. And there wasn't really email. All requests were done over fax. Everyone wanted a fax, so I had a fax machine at home. Wow. So if you wanted to put in a request to cover a show or get in touch with someone or whatever, this is pre-email, so you'd send a fax.
Yeah. That's funny that you say that, because we had Dylan Rucker on, and he was saying that when he was getting into this, he was DMing, and it's like nowadays you could just like DM managers or or other filmmakers that do this.
You can also like go to the Red Light, management website and find the contact info for any artist in town, for example, and that would be unheard of, 20 years ago, right?
Exactly. The resources now are just, you could get your way in, but back then it was very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's why probably some of the work is so unique too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like nowadays it's like everybody's got a photographer, everybody's got a videographer on the road, which is great. It's an essential now.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, I felt like it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. And, a lot of the photography I do, which is more candid behind the scenes stuff and all that, or tour photography, people didn't have much of a use for it back then. They might hire a photographer to shoot one show for like the tour book or whatever, but there was no social media getting updated every day, or, the people were really loved the black and white candid photography, the reportage stuff I did, but they didn't know what to do with it. They're like, it's a beautiful photo and a beautiful moment, but we're not going to put it on a t-shirt. We're not going to put it on an album cover. And they didn't really know what to do with it. And now with social media and everything, and the day after the CMT Awards, every artist wants photos of themselves hugging managers and wives and kissing with their awards and all that backstage. Yeah. But the artist wouldn't have had anything to do with that other than make a print for their wall, I guess. 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, or a book, maybe down the line.
Yeah.
It's wild, because when I first started, and I started after you, you've been doing this longer than I have, obviously, but
a little bit, just a little bit.
And when I went out on the road with Groban, there was no YouTube yet. There was no Instagram. There was none of that, and it was more website stuff. So it was like, okay, well, let's shoot some video content. And
so you go to the website and see live clips from the tour or something like that.
Some BTS clips on the website, And then I feel like there was a big shift when I started with Keith, when they brought me on board with Keith Urban. He had a sponsor of AT&T, was the big sponsor on the tour. And their deal was that they wanted to put behind the scenes video and photo on their platform, to promote the tour and do these like just kind of BTS type pieces. I felt like that's kind of where the shift started to kind of happen, where, oh wow, there's media that we could kind of distribute and people could view now, and then all of a sudden Instagram came about, and that everything changed everything,
and Instagram could go away and it's all going to change again, right? I mean,
exactly. Do you think nowadays it's beneficial to you getting more work that way with Instagram and everything?
I think it goes both ways. I mean, to your point, there's a reason for a lot more photography and more photo shoots and needing constant, because it used to be you do one photo shoot every 2 years. They'd use it in the album package, they'd send it out as press, and then you wouldn't see the band wouldn't do a shoot like that for another 2 years, because they wouldn't need to until the next album cycle, right? And now it's like we do a shoot and do 5 or 6 looks with an artist, and within a month they've posted a photo from each look on Instagram, and they're ready to do another, so in that way it's a good thing for me, I think. On the other hand, Instagram's, to your point, made it a necessity for every artist to have a full-time, staff photographer essentially now. So they obviously do a lot of the tour stuff, and a lot of them are doing album covers and music videos and everything as well.
Yeah.
So, because of social media and the need for so much content, people have so many full-time content guys that a lot of artists don't find the need to hire an outside photographer when they've already got someone on salary.
I feel like it's a kind of a balance though too, because I feel like you said, like with artists having to get like album stuff shot where you said like 2 years, but now it's like a little more of like a 6-month thing.
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of balances a little bit more probably for you with getting even more work than what it was, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Probably. Yeah.
But like, because like touring stuff, another person I was talking to, we were talking about how, in a concert thing or a concert setting where there's like 10 photographers taking photos for, say, Getty or, or press or whatever, or the local magazine, local newspaper or whatever. But then they have like their tour guy.
Yeah.
And
he's the only guy with any access for everyone listening who doesn't know. Those other photographers get 2 songs, 3 songs. It seems now that they're always all back at the soundboard and need like a 600 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
I won't do that. I'm sure you won't do that.
Yeah.
If you want me to shoot, you need to let me do what I do. And if you want the pictures that I make, you need to let me do it, do my thing and make them.
Yeah.
And be able to, wander around and shoot on stage, in front of stage, backstage, wherever it is, or else we're going to get the same photos as they have. But it's really unfortunate for those press photographers now, because I think they used to get, at the very least, they used to be at the front of the stage, which seems more rare than not now, right?
Yeah,
Would you say?
true.
You
it's
tour
totally
with more bands than I do, so
it's true. It's totally true. And I think too, I feel like Instagram and posting photos, that's probably beneficial now, because obviously with you doing all of these artists, obviously the artist and the managers trust you, and they're like, okay, go into the pit, go backstage,
right?
Get those shots. We're like the newspaper people and stuff like that. They're only limited to 2 or 3 songs out of front of house. I feel like you and I or something, it's like there's that trust.
Yes.
Just from the history and the years of doing it,
That's my whole career, I say, is built on trust. It's not the photography or the quality. It's, artists trusting you. There's artists I work with, like Bob Dylan I've worked with for 15 years, and I'll never tell a story about Bob Dylan or a Bob Dylan shoot, and that's how you stick around,
Exactly.
And they know that if I take a bad photo, it's never going to see the light of day. I'm never going to breach that trust.
Yeah.
And those relationships and that trust of how I built my entire career, honestly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I tell people. It's like your work's going to get you there. Your relationships are going to keep you there.
Yeah.
Because of the trust.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're going to do great work for an artist, they're going to want to use you and use you and use you, and they trust you.
And it's not even just the artist. I always say, I need to earn the trust of everyone kind of in their orbit. So if I'm at the CMT Awards and want to walk into a dressing room, I need to know the security, specifically security. They need to trust you for different reasons. If you're going in on the bus alone and they're not in there, right?
Yeah.
The managers, the makeup artists, the glam team, the stylist, the publicist. It's kind of like you need to know everybody, and they all need to trust you, in order to do what we do, right?
I know. It's wild walking through Bridgestone Arena, and you just know all the security people in there, just walking, you're just kind of like fist bumping everybody because you see them all the time.
I do think social media also, though, has kind of raised awareness for us as photographers. I know Carrie Underwood, who you tour with, tags you in every photo, for example. Taylor Swift tags me, and I'm doing a lot of dates on the Eras tour, at least a handful of them. Or I did 8. And Taylor's great. This should be a given that us as photographers or artists are credited for our work. Just it's the same kind of battle songwriters and other people in the business are in, but it's not a given that we're going to get credit on our photos, honestly,
It's not like a thing where it's in a contract where they have to like tag us. It's
it can
just
be
voluntarily.
Sometimes I put that in.
Really?
It can
be.
I
didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
But, and raising awareness for photographers, and I'll be shooting a Taylor show, and people will take photos of me shooting the show or photos with me because they know me as someone that she tags frequently, and it'll be like, John Shearer spotted in the wild photographing Taylor in Kansas City or whatever. And, without her, if she weren't tagging me on Instagram, they would have no idea who we are, who produces the work, I guess, right?
Yeah. Have you seen, so it's really funny because like obviously being photographer, videographer and stuff like that, it's like, we go and we shoot these shows. It's like we can't really like see them and enjoy them. Have you even seen the Eras tour?
No, but it's interesting because I saw the film in theaters, and being where we are on the floor next to the stage is above head high. And the whole stage is an LED screen, essentially.
Gotcha.
So the show we're seeing from up front is completely different than the show people are seeing from up above.
Yeah.
And until I saw the movie, I didn't really realize that. I mean, once in a while we'll run up to the top and get a wide shot or something for one song, maybe. Yeah. But it is interesting because the people up above and the people down below are kind of seeing two completely different shows.
Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. I felt like that when I did 2 Carrie tours that she did in the round. The Storyteller tour and the Cry Pretty tour, and then it filled the entire arena floor. So it's like I felt like every night I actually had an opportunity to kind of do something a little different because it's not just like one stage at the end of the arena. Right. It was like I was able to like run around and you could just kind of go 10 feet this way and it's a whole different look. Yeah. And I was running around doing 6 miles a night.
Yeah, I wear my Apple Watch. I've gotten 22,000 steps, which is like 8 or 9 miles, and a lot of that's up and down stairs. To the top. Yeah, because the stage is so massive, and I'm chasing her up and down the runway the whole time. And at times I'm, if there's going to be a firework moment, I might go to the very top of the 300 section to get a photo of the whole bowl with the fireworks. And you got to work out in. Exactly. And she plays for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Yeah. So,
Amazing. Taylor's awesome. She was on when I did the Keith Urban tour back in 2009, I think it was Defying Gravity tour. She was one of the openers.
Yeah, that's very cool.
She was she was so great. The whole team was great. Yeah. And I was there when she did the big prank on Keith when she
like
came
the final
out.
date or whatever.
Yeah, she came out and dressed up as Kiss.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, during Kiss a Girl.
Do you have photos of it?
Oh, we had there's video online about it. Okay. Apparently it was like one of the best pranks in country music or something. I'm sure. It was rated or something, but it's really funny. Yeah. And that just shows what, Taylor's personality is too, because she's great.
Yeah. She is.
Are you going to do more when she comes, or is she coming back to the States?
She's coming back later this year. She's in she's in Tokyo starting next week, but then mostly Europe for most of the year.
Do you do any of those at all?
I hope.
Oh, nice.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to be great.
Don't always know this far in advance, but I hope. I'd love to. I've made it clear that I'd love to.
Have you done worldwide stuff?
Yeah.
What's your favorite? What was like?
I did Bob Dylan at Hyde Park in 2019, I think.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What else? What else?
Most of what I've done internationally is not necessarily concert dates, but artists will bring me out. Like if the one memorable one was Katy Perry's Unconditionally music video, which was in a beautiful ballroom in London, and they wanted to do the single cover. Often we do single covers on music video sets for one reason or another. Yeah. But usually partly because they're on a set and it's built out and they're in glam and everything. There's kind of a theme that runs through with the song that's in the single cover of the music video. Yeah. And often that's a situation where, as you know, music videos are like 15-hour plus shoot days. Yeah. And, as a still photographer, I'll get it's often just, a few minutes every few hours, if the crew's changing lenses or switching scenes or whatever, and they don't want the artist to stand around, they'll toss the artist to me as a photographer, and we'll do a still photo shoot. But it is a lot of that, like, wait around for 3 or 4 hours, shoot for 5 minutes, and this can go on for 20
hours. Would you ever
hours,
just shoot like just some BTS photos of when they're shooting?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. They never use it. It doesn't seem like, but I do. Yeah,
that's cool.
But I even if I'm using their set in between takes, like if they're switching lenses or something, I'll have an assistant fly in kind of a light on a C-stand or a stick basically, and hold it in just to supplement it, and try and light it myself and make it my photo instead of just kind of, you as the director have built a set and lit a scene and put the artist in, and I need to do something a little different, so I'm not just kind of piggybacking on the shot that you built. I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
Sometimes we'll even build our own set in another room, for the sound stage or something, and there's conference rooms. We'll set up sets or seamless backdrops and things like that to bring the artists to in between takes.
Yeah, yeah. I was looking at your website last night too, just to kind of remind myself, but. Like, we're kind of shift back to Taylor again, but like just the poster art, know, that you shot of just the live image.
It was a live image. Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah.
It's so great.
I got lucky.
Just like all the other shots that I've seen that you got of her, you know, what besides Taylor, like what other shows or like some of the stuff that you've shot, just not around the world, but just in the States or anything like that? What's some of your other moments?
Sure. So the first tour I did was with Jane's Addiction on Lollapalooza in 2003 for 2 weeks. And I'm trying to remember. I actually was really the whole festival photographer. So, you know, the show started at noon. You know, I shot every single band throughout the day. And the side stage, like parking lot noon bands that year were Kings of Leon and 30 Seconds to Mars.
Wow.
And then the headliners, you know, were Jane's Addiction, Audio Slave, Incubus.
Yeah, I remember Audio Slave.
A Perfect Circle. There was, you know, so I shot like 15 bands over the course of a day.
Man.
And would have to, you know, get back on the bus and before I went to bed, deliver, I don't know what it was, a dozen photos per band or something like that I guess they would use on the website.
And that was all digital, right?
It was digital, but like early crappy digital.
Yeah.
You know, like I go back and look at the files and they're so small, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know, obviously under a megabyte, you know.
Yeah.
And they had banding and the low light. You wouldn't want to go over like 640 ISO. If you're shooting at 1,000, there's banding and lines and stuff all over the place. It's the only choice we had.
Cameras have come a long way.
They've come a long way. Yeah, yeah.
So kind of a little bit about the camera stuff.
Sure.
Were you Nikon at one point?
I started on Canon, and then I switched to Nikon for about 5 years because Canon kind of fell behind. There was a period when every year one would kind of one up the other. You'd switch systems to one, and then Canon was really focused on video for a long time instead of stills, where Nikon was more focused on stills and was never really thought of in the video world in the same way Canon was, starting with that 5D, you know?
Yeah.
So I did ultimately switch back to Canon. I think the quality is better, but I
remember you and I had a conversation where you bought the R5.
Yeah.
And then you started buying all the new RF glass.
Yeah.
Because I think you were one of the first ones that had that 28 to 70.
Yeah. Well, I switched from Nikon to Canon for that camera. Yeah. And I love it, but I also use at award shows. I really just use Leicas, you know, and I just use available light, black and white, Leica Q3 and an
all
M11.
Of them are so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have the Canon, and the Canon does work great in the studio. It's awesome for live stuff. It's great for all of it, but I also now use Phase 1 medium format in the studio.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different workflow. The quality's insane. The files, I mean, the TIFF files are 300 megabytes. They're enormous. So, I mean, the amount of storage you need just to, you know, I guess that's like 6 times the size of the R5, you know, something like that. So it's very slow. It feels very archaic. You know, you're not rapidly firing photos. You know, if it's a fast-paced photo shoot, you can't use it. You have to be very deliberate about when you shoot and what the moment is, and get a photo every few seconds instead of like 12 photos a second. You know? So, but the files are beautiful on the Phase 1.
How about that 28 to 70?
But the 28 to 70 f2, I love also. I think that's I always say that's the sharpest lens I've ever used.
It's a beast. It's a beast.
And it's a beast physically as well.
Yeah, it's so heavy.
Yeah, it's big. For studio, it's great. I still once you use it, you can't really go back to like the f4 or the 2.8 version, but it is bigger than my 70 to 200 lens, I think. So it's a massive lens, but the quality, and it kind of replaces 3 prime lenses. You know, you don't need a fixed 35, 50, and 85. Yeah. Because it's f2 all the way throughout. It kind of replaces all of that.
Very true.
So, but
very true.
The quality's beautiful. However, I do use medium format in the studio now often.
Yeah, I love using that 28 to 70 on live shows.
Yeah, I do too.
That's some of my it's like if I had two, I mean, I always run around with 2 cameras, and it's like the 28 to 70, 70 to 200. Yeah. You know, if I just need to shoot an hour-long show, those are the 2 right there for sure.
And then I'll usually even leave it at the drum riser, something like a 15 to 35, just to get, you know, the drum riser wide shot looking out at the arena. Sometimes the 28 isn't wide enough.
Yeah. You get into it's wild not being like a tour photographer, but man, you get into positions where you're on stage and you're getting those shots. Yeah. You know, and
Well, again, if you want the photo, if you go to my site and you want these types of pictures, you have to give me the access, or else we can't make 100%. Them, right? And usually that's only given to the tour photographers. Although if I'm shooting, the artist has generally hired me and owns the photos, so it's like they're your pictures, So the more access you give me, the better pictures you're going to have to do whatever you want with them. Yeah. So I think they kind of know the deal.
Yeah, it's really funny because sometimes I'll be up on stage and I'll see you kind of off to the left or right of me on certain shows, and I'm like, okay, cool. I know, I trust that. I know he's getting good stuff.
Well, and I love seeing you up there because tour photographers are all over the map. You know, and a lot of guys, for example, there could be a live show like CMA Fest, and they don't realize it's not their tour date and that the whole stage is on camera, and or even an award show, an artist wins an award and these guys will run out and practically get tackled because they're jumping on a live camera on live TV.
There's definitely, I mean, CMA, they had given us like stage restrictions, tour videographers and photographers, obviously because of that, the live show thing, and they would put us, we'd have to go kind of in the pit area if we wanted to shoot the artist. So I feel like some artists are just kind of like, we'll just get photos from, from say you.
Because CMA owns them and can hand them out to the artist.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, I love shooting the CMA Fest, but it's so damn hot. Yeah. It's just like,
it's always hot and humid and steamy and buggy and rainy and it's all of it. But I know you mentioned like Dave Bergman, for example, is going to be on if he hasn't. And I feel like you and Dave, and there's a handful of kind of, gold standard tour photographers who aren't going to get in the way. But Dave and I will talk, and it's the Grammys and Luke's on, and, he doesn't get to be there as the tour photographer. And that's obviously upsetting because from an archival standpoint, Luke Combs wants photos of himself, at the Grammys taken by his guy. And if David or Luke want to make a book in 20 years, they need those, it's a historic moment. But the thing I'm telling them often is like, you know what you're doing and you're not going to get in the way and everyone trusts you, but you're kind of the exception, to the, some of these award shows that open it up to let every artist bring a tour photographer, and then suddenly there's 25 people running around backstage getting in the way and running out on stage during a live show because they're not, or the Steadicam guy who's running around filming trips over them or something because they don't, know to.
Yeah, I feel like it's just kind of somebody that, obviously that crew and that live TV crew is just like, it's just another body out there that doesn't need to be out there. It
is, and at most shows, whether it's CMA Fest or the Grammys or the MTV VMAs, we're all the same, it's the same video crew, it's the same stage manager, it's the same director.
Yeah.
There's a few of the same photographers that shoot all of it. And the reason why is because we all know each other. And, I go to rehearsals and I meet with all the camera guys and see where they're going to be. I talk to the Steadicam guy and see what songs he's going to be on stage for. I talk to the stage manager at CMA Fest to figure out what songs they're filming for live TV and what they're not. So I know when I can be on stage and out of the way. And, but it is a process, and it's much harder when a photographer just kind of shows up with an artist and runs out on stage without taking all those steps that I just mentioned and gets in the way.
Because they're so used to it nowadays. It's like you're watching an artist in a band, and you always seeing a videographer just kind of running around the stage.
And that's new, right?
Artist. That's very new.
I mean, it's running in circles around the artist and everything. But thinking of concerts when we were growing up,
you didn't see that.
No, there's none of that. Right? Even the photographer who was working for the artist would have never been on stage because they would have said, we don't want the audience to see a photographer up there, I guess, right? And now everyone's accustomed to it. Maybe.
Now it's very kind of it happens now all the time.
Right.
We see it a lot.
Right.
I'll see clips on Instagram of just obviously videographers getting great shots from behind the artist, but if you're watching the show, you're seeing this guy just kind of jumping back and
I think you don't really think twice about it anymore because everyone's used to it. But 20 years ago, you would have thought, what in the world? To shoot on stage, you would have really had to be hidden in the wings. Out of sight. But now we're just running straight down the thrust or the runway with the artist, right?
Oh yeah. You and I had a conversation at one point where you were talking about, now you're close with the FGL guys.
Yeah.
And I think you went out on the road with them for a couple times, right?
Yeah. For Yeah, on a couple tours I never did the whole summer kind of thing, but I would do, 3-4 day weekends here and there. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember we had a conversation. You had asked me, you're like, do I need to bring my own pillow?
Well, it had been so long since I toured, and 20 years ago, venues didn't provide things like towels, if you remember that, you know? So I was asking you, like, do I need a pillow? Do I need a But when I used to tour, you used to have to bring all that.
Yeah.
I think Live Nation, maybe, you would explain to me even, has kind of changed the standards with that. But it didn't used to be a given that that any of that would be provided. We used to bring it all ourselves, from what I remember.
Yeah. It's wild. I thought that was pretty funny that you would ask that. And, because it's just, we don't, there's people that just don't tour as much. They just don't know.
And it's second nature to you.
It's just second nature. It's like, about like FGL, when did you go, like when you went on the road with them? I mean, because I know you guys are really close.
Tyler and I are close friends. Yes.
Yeah. Was that because, did you know him before all of this?
No, we met through the industry kind of thing, I think, and our wives are close friends, so they became close couple friends. Brian and Brittany are friends as well. I mean, they're all friends, but Tyler and Haley and Clea and I hang out quite a bit, vacation together and spend time together and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's great when you can tour with an artist who you're friends with, because it makes for much more fun,
Yeah, exactly.
There's other artists, on the other hand, like on that Lollapalooza tour, there's artists on that tour who I never even met, I mean, Maynard from A Perfect Circle, for example, he wasn't exactly hanging around socially with people like myself, but I think that, and I wasn't shooting, God, it was, even on that tour, when I was on the tour, and that was 2003, I think there was only like 1 or 2 shows where they even let me shoot from the stage.
Yeah.
And it really, I had to work it out with production as to how I was hiding and everything. When I used to do No Doubt, they had an all-white stage, so anyone on stage would have to wear an all-white jumpsuit, which is kind of cool. Funny. Yeah.
You think you crew, you have to wear all blacks.
Yeah.
On that, you had to wear
but
all
an
white.
all-white stage, you had to wear a white jumpsuit. But there was no backstage photography, as far as I remember, on Lollapalooza or any of that. And again, it's now, as a tour photographer, you're shooting anything you want, really. Yeah. And the artists are using those photos on socials and stuff. And my guess is maybe they didn't have anything to do with photos of an artist getting ready in their dressing room. Doesn't, they're not going to send that out to press, I guess, which is what they were doing with my photos.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I guess there just wasn't a need for it. And artists weren't accustomed to having photographers hanging out in dressing rooms.
Yeah.
Now, I assume you do that with all the artists you tour with to some extent.
Shoot everything.
Yeah.
Shoot everything.
It's like you own it, so let me shoot it all, and you can make the decision in 10 years whether you want to do anything with it or not, but at least you'll have it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I feel like a lot of it, I feel like almost 80% of it is archival. Maybe 90% of it is archival.
Well, then there'll be some random need 2 years from now.
Yeah.
If you're working with Carrie and Billboard is running a story on her and wants a spread of that no one's seen, an exclusive photo, for walking to stage or something, I'm sure you can dig through it.
Yeah. And, I mean, even down the line with video stuff, I mean, even if it's like documentary, down in 10, 15 years from now or whatever, for any artist, having that archival footage is, I think, pretty key. But it was funny, I was having a conversation too about how a lot of people now are shooting video for, say, Instagram or TikTok, and the quality is really can you use that in a documentary in 10 years? Is the quality like, because I feel like a good videographer out on the road would probably capture stuff that looks great for that, and to have that in your kind of mind, like thinking you're kind of future proofing and you're not just doing this just for tomorrow's post, but I feel like
a lot of guys get cool stuff with iPhones because they need the orientation for Reels or TikTok, and so I'll see tour guys put down their SLR or whatever and pick up a phone and run out there too. So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We're talking about archiving and all that.
Yeah.
To me, to kind of back it up, tour photography right now to me seems like the Wild West. Everyone operates differently.
Yeah.
No one knows what to charge. No one knows what rights to give.
Right.
Do you give all rights? Is it a buyout? How's it archived? How are photos delivered? Is it, because a lot of times I hear managers and artists complain, we brought this photographer out, he was great and everything, but we're used to getting all the photos like an hour after the show, and it took the guy 2 days to get them to me. Or 3 months down the line, we wanted to pull a photo, but it turned out, we didn't have the assets, we didn't have the hard drive, we didn't have the Dropbox or the whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's not really any industry standard, it seems, for any of those things, from rates to rights to deliverables to storage to archiving. So if you shoot Carrie, what do you do with that content? I mean,
so the process with that, obviously I go out and do photo and video for her, and
which is tough, I assume.
It's tough. I mean, it is, because I know you don't really do video at all.
I don't. No.
And you have you do photography and that's it.
Yeah.
But like with photo and video, the way that I archive stuff is I do it by obviously show, day, archive it into a hard drive, and then I'll edit photos after a show. I turn them all in. I'll turn them over to management.
Just the edited photos.
Yeah. And
you keep the full take of raw photos.
Keep everything. And what I'll do is I'll always have 2 drives, backup and a master, always. And then when, say, a weekend is over or a week is over, management will get a drive. Okay. And then I hang on to a drive just in case, like, say, in 2 years from now, they're like, oh, can you get to this photo or get to this video?
Happens all the time.
Yeah, so that's why it's like I don't have to go to the office and, kind of dig for it or anything like that. But we always, I'm very particular about the way that I archive and the way that I file and categorize stuff, because I've gotten stuff that has been requested for me to edit, like videos, that I get stuff that is just a mess.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's from. There's no date. There's no nothing or anything like that. But I've always been particular from day one on how I organize, files and everything. But after, like, going back kind of to my process at night after a show, I'll Dropbox. It's just a Dropbox to management, and they have it and they send it off and they do their thing, But I don't know if did that really answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think it does. I kind
of went off a little bit there.
So then, does management have a master Dropbox kind of with a folder for each show?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So like on a tour, like when we did the Denim and Rhinestones tour, it's just every night would be another Dropbox file, and it would just go in and it would just be all the selects. And then we do video recaps, like, say, every 3 or 4 shows.
And would they get your full take of video as well?
Yeah, they get everything
on a hard drive later, but the edit lives on a Dropbox if they need to access that.
Exactly.
And you're Jeff Johnson, and you're one of the top, like I mentioned, kind of gold standard tour guys, and you probably have a pretty organized system and have this all down. I don't know if every 20-year-old videographer or photographer organizes it as well.
Yeah, and that's important.
Yeah,
it's very important, because, and here's a exact example. During COVID, a long time ago, I was on tour with Tim McGraw and Faith Hill on the Soul to Soul 2 tour in 2006, and I had organized all the files. I mean, we were shooting on, like, tape at that point, so everything would have to be ingested. And
2006, okay, because they did another one in, like, 2016 or something. That must have been the second one.
They did one 2000. The first one I think was 2000. Then they did one 2006, 2007, and then it was like 2016 or something like that.
I think that's where I met you.
Was it? Well, I wasn't on.
You're with Billy Currington.
Yes, exactly.
And that was a similar tour, right?
On
it was a
McGraw.
Tim tour. Okay.
That was on the Tim McGraw tour. Yeah. Shotgun Rider tour or something like that.
That's right.
But prime example was management, Faith's manager, reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for files from 2006, video files. Do you have that? And I'm like, hey, I've got backups of everything. And it's like I saved the day because of my organization.
Yeah.
And still having those files from back then, that they could come to me and be like, hey, we're looking for this. Okay, I got it. Here you go.
Yeah.
And then Dropbox it over. And then there you go. Just kind of save the day, But that's very important for people that are starting in this. Is organization is so key. You have to be organized.
Right.
You have to have the hard drives. You have to have the system. It was really funny. Another one of my filmmaker friends, he does a thing where I thought this was brilliant, actually, is he takes a screenshot of his open folder on the computer, and he'll take that with everything that's on that drive, and he'll print it out and he'll tape it onto the hard drive. So that way he could just like,
That's smart.
there's a hard drive and there's everything on it.
That's
right
smart.
there.
Yeah.
You know, or you could do like the new like little stickers with the QR codes.
Yeah.
And you just pop it on a hard drive, click it, and then you've got all your.
That's new. I've never heard of that one. That's good.
Pretty cool. I use it actually for storage at my house.
That's cool.
For like old stuff. But now, I mean, it's like, that's a great idea for hard drives where you could just literally click it and it shows all the contents on the hard drive.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So kids out there, there you go.
My wife makes fun of me. I'm like this organized in my daily life too. And like, I'll get I'm signing up for AT&T or something. And, they'll ask if you're an existing customer. And it's like, well, unless you have the bill from 10 years ago with your account number, we can't, give you the discount. And it's like, I have the bill right here. Actually, you want to call my bluff on this,
That's funny. Yeah, but organization's key. You got to shoot, and you got to be a good shooter, and you got to be a good videographer, and all that stuff, and do great edits and stuff. But
something we kind of touched on when I showed up is that I always say the photography is very important. You have to deliver, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's like less than half of the job, and all the other stuff we're talking about, from relationships to trust to organization to archive, all of this they're all sort of pieces of the puzzle, and the photography itself is just one of those pieces, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people hire someone more experienced because, or in my world, in the studio world, which we can get into, the photography is a piece of it, but you're also hand-holding a client and working with, an artist and staying on time and on schedule. And in a way, you're kind of like the captain driving the whole ship.
Yeah.
And yes, you have to deliver, and the photography is important, but it's just one piece of this enormous puzzle.
Yeah.
It's part of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like too, it's like when you work for an artist and, you're there and you're with them all the time, I always say that you have to know when to be here, but then you have to know when to be back here too, just because they're an artist, they're creative, they want their space, but they also want to be documented, So I feel like, there is this kind of push and pull that you have to have when you're kind of more of like a BTS. But when you're doing like studio stuff, that's a whole different.
Well, and I think a lot of people kind of fall into there's a group that kind of falls into the groupie bucket as well, and they think because they're around the artist so much, suddenly think they're best friends, And to your point, there are boundaries. You asked, touring with friends, even Tyler, FGL, things like that. I'm still working for him, and I'm still on tour, and I'm not there to hang out on the bus and get drunk every night. That's not. I'm there working. You know.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of younger photographers don't really understand that this is your client.
Yeah.
You might be friendly, and you might turn into friends, but you're not here to be their best friend and hang out. And a lot of photographers I can think of have been let go from tours because they're thinking they are the best friend and they're on tour. And people, you turn your photos in and deliver everything before you go out and have drinks with the artist, for example. Because at the end of the day, you're paid to do a job.
Exactly. It's so true, because it's like, when I'm out on the road, I want to get my work done. It's like when the show's over, because you know how it is. It's like in a concert setting. It's like our day starts later. It's like, and we shoot the show, and then I edit. Then I edit for 2 hours.
Right.
It's like, I want to get my work done, get it pushed off to the side, then I'll go have a drink.
Right, exactly.
But it's like a band will be like off stage and they're done for the day.
Yeah.
I'm not done.
Right.
I'm not done yet. And everybody's all, where are you at? I'm like, I'm working.
Right.
I gotta get my stuff done.
And generally I'm usually on the band bus, it seems like.
Yeah.
And they're done with the show and they can eat and drink and have fun, and that's when our second half of your job starts,
exactly.
right?
That's the important part.
Right. And I think it's again important to know that you're not hired to be the artist's friend and hang out. I mean, they might offer you a drink and you might be friendly and become friends, but you got to do your job first or you're going to lose the gig, because there's other people off site waiting on that content. There's a social media person with management who's not on the road, and they're waiting for your photos to post. So
very, very true. Very true. Yeah, I love that. All right, you got to tell me about. It's really funny because my wife is a huge Met Gala fan.
Oh,
and every
I didn't know
time,
where you were going with that.
And every time we're like at home and we're watching it, I'm just like, I'm watching the red carpet on it, and all of a sudden, oh, there's John in the background. There's John in the background. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, and like all the other like events like
Sure.
that, you know, outside of the concert world.
So, to give some background, I was on staff at Getty Images for like a dozen years, and the bulk of what I did was events and parties, and that's what I was doing in LA every night. Now I do a handful of them a year, and it's fun, and it's a breath of fresh air and everything when you're not out every single night doing that stuff. But I still do the major events, meaning like the Met Gala, the Oscars. This weekend I have the Grammys. But I do try and take a more creative approach to how I'm photographing them. Often it's with Leica cameras and fixed lenses and in black and white and looking for moments and something. My goal is to just, whether, you know, you're on tour with an artist and you're shooting a concert or I'm shooting the Met Gala or whatever, my goal is to get something different than the other photographers are getting. So while they might be more focused on fashion, you know, full length head to toe photos of the gowns, I might be more focused on a wide shot that shows the whole pandemonium around it, you know, and capturing moments in that sense. The Met Gala itself is specifically challenging because it's on the steps that lead into the Met, obviously, and there's photographers on each side, so you're shooting into each other. So when anyone approaches to be photographed, it's not like at the CMA Awards where they just go down the line with 3 stops and everyone gets a photo of everyone. There's a 50% chance of whether you're even going to get the person in front of you or not, because you could have their back because they could be posing for people on the other side.
Gotcha.
So they kind of zigzag up and down the steps in the carpet. And a friend of mine actually jokes, the biggest event of the year is the Met Gala. The second biggest event of the year is everyone you missed at the Met Gala, you know, because that list of people that you didn't get is so massive because it's just luck of the draw. Same with Cannes Film Festival. Photographers are shooting into each other. There's not a backdrop. So it's luck of the draw as to whether the actor or actress is even going to stop in front of you or you're going to have their back or they're going to stop 20 feet down the way from, or, you know, someone else you may be photographing someone else in front of you and then Beyonce arrives and just skips you and goes to the next section because you're busy photographing someone else, you know?
I've never done anything like that. I've never been kind of in that line of taking photos of people arriving. You know, is it, I mean, and I'm totally kind of clueless to this. So I'd love to hear that. I mean, is it still kind of like a shout out type thing? Like, oh, turn this way and look this way. Or is that more like of an awards thing?
No, that's definitely what all the photographers do. I'm not loud like they are. So I don't yell
just
or anything like that.
The guy next to you for
totally, or wave or something like that, you know, and in general, they're going to look your direction anyway. But there's enough people yelling on all sides of you. You know,
because I feel like when I'm shooting like a behind the scenes or video or something, walking on the red carpet with an artist, I always hear kind of the shout outs and stuff. I didn't
on the left, over your shoulder, all that. And I think they kind of I think it's kind of part of the, like at a film premiere, for example, I think the producers like to see all that chaos, you know. They don't even, you know, there's 50 photographers. You don't need all 50 photographers. You know, if you have 5 photographers that service to Getty and AP and local paper and all that, a lot of that is really just kind of window dressing, you know, the dozens and dozens of extra photographers and screaming and on your left and on your right and all that. But I think like at a film premiere, the producers like to see all that chaos kind of. It builds excitement, I guess, around the premiere.
So when you're at the Met Gala, I mean, you said the Leica camera. Do you use anything else or just the Leica?
I do. You know, the Leica I use for really, you know, creative photography and moments and stuff. But I do have Canon R5s. They're tethered. We have photo editors working on site there. And honestly, within less than a minute of shooting any photo, it's already on the Getty site because I'm tethered to them. There's a whole sort of assembly line process. There's people editing, photoshopping, captioning, and uploading, and it kind of goes through this machine of, you know, multiple people, and it hits the site immediately.
That's one thing I never really understood too, you know, because I was never in that world again, you know. But like, you know, because I've seen you at CMAs, you know, shooting, you know, for the CMA Awards, and I'll be there shooting Carrie or something, and it's a whole different thing because like I'm my own guy and I just shoot and then I'm editing stuff later. But I remember like there were card runners. Right?
Yeah, so if I'm stationary, like at the Met Gala, the camera's plugged in directly, to an Ethernet cable tethered to an editor, and it's showing up on their computer in real time.
Yeah.
But if I'm running around roaming or using the Leica and shooting raw files and things like that, I have a dedicated card runner who just kind of keeps eyes on me the whole time, and we're on text the whole time, and at commercial breaks or whatever when they could come out passing off cards and going back to same workflow I just mentioned, except instead of being tethered or plugged in, they're running the cards back to the team.
Now, I feel like in concert photography, I feel like we kind of fire off shots very fast, and we fire off a lot of them.
Yeah.
Now, for something like Met Gala,
same.
You're doing the same. So you're just like boom, 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 and they're just seeing them in real time at the computer.
Yeah.
And they're just like, okay, that's
10,000 photos. It could be. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. I never thought about that.
Something like the Vanity Fair Oscar party. It's a pre-party, a viewing party, and an after party. So at that, you're shooting from maybe 3 or 4 if the show starts at 5 until there's people arriving at 1:30 in the morning still. You know, you're shooting for like 10 hours straight. Yeah. And it could be 10,000 plus frames, I guess, but you're shooting hundreds, if not thousands of people coming through.
Yeah. I think I average about 2,000 shots a night.
I think that's on the high end for me for a concert. Yeah. I'm a lighter shooter than most, but at those bigger events, it's more obviously. And a lot of times, I mean, it's getting eye contact and things like that, but also when there's that many photographers, things like picking up other photographers' flashes, for example. You know, you could shoot 10 frames in a row and only one of them's exposed because you've picked up so many flashes and all the other frames.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it like that.
Which can look cool. It can work for you if you're trying to make something creative. You know, you can drag the shutter and do a longer exposure to intentionally pick up all these flashes, or it can screw you up.
Yeah. Talk about the Leica.
I'll
tell you really quick my story with Leica. I have the Q2 and I love it, and I don't use it as much as I should, because I'll use it and then I'll look at the photos and go, man, I need to be using this way more often. You know, but when you post stuff, you're posting a lot of stuff from the Leica, and it is stunning. I mean, you're getting those moments, because the moments, that's what it's about. I feel like, you know, some of these black and white shots that you're putting up or they're using are these moments. There was the one that was just recently posted with Lainey and Mandolin. You know, that's just, those are the moments. Yeah. And that was with the Leica.
Yeah.
Right?
So at most award shows, so I mentioned that my favorite camera when I was kind of growing up was a Leica M6. This Leica, now the M11 and the Q2, and these cameras are the kind of closest thing to that camera since we transferred, or since we moved to digital photography, I guess. I love the way it feels in my hand, but what I love the most about it is it's quiet, small, discreet. It's essentially the size of a point and shoot camera. If you go into an artist's dressing room, okay, we'll take the Lainey and Mandolin moment, for example. Mandolin's Lainey Wilson's manager, and when she won Entertainer of the Year, I guess they hugged backstage, and I got a series of photos that I framed for them and everything.
Incredible. That was awesome.
But if I was there with a big SLR camera, a massive lens, and a flash, it ruins the you know.
Exactly.
So they probably would have immediately just turned and looked at me and posed, because that's what you do when a camera starts flashing. Or, you know, if you're in someone's dressing room, I want to be a fly on the wall, and I don't want them to know I'm there. I don't want them to hear me shooting. I don't even want it to look like I have a camera. It's not much bigger than a phone. And I think that when you're in there with a massive SLR camera, lens, and flash, it ruins that dynamic, I guess.
True.
And suddenly you're no longer just kind of, you know, invisible in the corner. It feels like there's press has been invited into the dressing room, I guess. You know, it's and the sound of the shutter and the flash, and it's distracting, and people turn and look, and people pose and stuff, and I don't want them to even know what I'm shooting or when. And that's also when the trust piece really comes into play as well, because, you know, they need to know that I'm not shooting them when they're changing, or you know, in their boxers, or you know, whatever it is. So, you know, they don't know when I'm shooting or what I'm shooting, but they know what I'm not shooting, I guess. It's a good way to put it.
Exactly.
But I strongly believe that if I didn't use these small, quiet, completely silent, and very small and nearly invisible, you know, cameras, I wouldn't be able to get the same moments that I do at those shows and in those dressing rooms and everything.
Yeah, I feel like I've been, you're right about that with the discreet, with the camera and small, and it's not loud and the flash and all that. I feel like I've been using the Leica now a lot in the studio because of that.
Sure. Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously when you're in a recording studio and they're recording, you can't be making noises, you can't be flashing, you can't hear the shutter and all that. It's like I feel like I'm getting more moments.
So when we used to have to use a sound blimp, I don't know if you ever used one of those, whether you're in a studio or if they're really made for unit or set photographers shooting on set when they're recording sound. The thing's like a quarter the size of this table, it's this big, and they're made specifically and custom by one guy for each camera. And the camera is completely encapsulated with foam. And I mean, it's what it sounds like. It's like a massive styrofoam blimp to silence the camera. Oh, wow. So when we used to have to shoot, before we had these cameras with these silent, electronic shutters, that's what we had to use. And the thing was, I know this is a podcast, so you can't see what I'm doing, but I mean, the thing is massive, and there couldn't be anything more distracting than that. But you had to use it because, to your point, mechanical shutters are loud.
Yeah,
you can't shoot in a studio. Exactly. Otherwise. So
yeah. I found myself using the Leica a lot more in the studio just because of that. Like you said, it's not invasive either.
You don't want to interrupt them. I mean, they're in a creative mindset, and they, I mean, I'm not a songwriter, so I can't imagine the concept of writing a song start to finish and putting it to music and recording it. But the last thing I would want is to interrupt that process.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, they're in there to, they're there to record, and they're in that creative, like you say, and they're in that moment, and it's like you don't want them to look over and pose for a photo.
No.
Or you want to get the moments.
Or just the sound of the constant clicking every couple seconds I would assume it's distracting if you're trying to write a song, right?
Exactly.
It would interrupt me.
Yeah. Wow.
So who's your favorite artist you've worked with or photographed?
Favorite artist?
Let's talk about favorite artists.
I'll tell you, I really do like working a lot with Carrie. Carrie's great. I love the production. I love the way that she works. She works so hard.
Yeah.
I've never seen a team or an artist work as hard as they do. And I love that because it challenges me.
Yeah.
And, I'm kind of I am her only person on the road.
Yeah.
And there's the trust factor and just the longevity of, I met Carrie and her team back when they toured with Keith Urban back in 2007. She was brand new then, so it's like, it circles back to those friendships that you develop early on and they kind of come back around. But anyway, I love working with her. Megan Maroney now too.
Right.
I love working with Megan. I love because she's brand new. It's new eyes to everything. Her and her band and her team, everything's new to them, so probably, I mean, both of those definitely stand out, but I've worked with so many other people. Chris Young, I love Chris. Chris has always been great to me.
Yeah.
I don't tour with him anymore.
But he's someone who's a friend. So you asked me about kind of FGL. I mean, that was a situation where, I mean, I know you guys would go out and things like that, and you did have a friendship.
Yeah. And I, that's the thing about Chris. Chris was he was always, I felt like he was kind of a friend first. I mean, I take that back. When I started working with him, obviously, it was a work thing, in the beginning, but like we became really good friends, and there was the trust factor and stuff like that. And we're still friends. We're still texting each other. He'll just call me randomly, just like, dude, what are you up to?
Yeah.
Let's grab a beer or something, But, I loved working with Chris. Faith Hill was one of my favorites too. Faith was great. I loved working with her back on that tour back in 2006.
I think with Carrie, you've really hit the jackpot looking at photos from the Vegas show and all that. As far, a lot of tour photographers.
We need to talk about Vegas.
Sure, and I'm happy to. But the production value, of Carrie's show, like the Taylor Era's show or whatever.
Yeah.
We're lucky that a lot of people are touring with artists who are the opening act, performing in daylight with zero production value, and it's like, how do you reinvent yourself each day and make cool creative photos that are different than the previous when there's nothing on stage, when the stage is a bunch of drum kits covered in black tarps,
That's how I feel like with the whole Carrie and Megan Maroney thing. It's like Megan's still on the climb and she's still an opening act here and there, so it's like, how do I get creative with that? But like with Carrie, it's like there's this huge production. David Bergman always, every time we go back and forth, he's like, well, we don't have pyro. You have pyro. I wish we had pyro.
Yeah, and Dave, I love a lot of what Dave does because he mounts cameras up above.
Yeah.
And he mounts cameras all over the place. They're on the truss up above the drum riser, and they're on the drum kit, and he puts in a lot of extra effort. He goes the extra mile on this tour, on this Luke Combs tour,
which is great, because all the stuff is fantastic.
But it's the things he does are unheard of for most newer kind of up and coming
it's
tour
great too
photographers,
because David is also just a photographer,
right?
He doesn't have to worry about doing video or anything because they have a video guy out there.
And I think that's worth talking about because there's a lot of artists. It's like, oh man, the photographer keeps missing this moment, or there's this moment in the show and he's missing it. We don't have photos of it, and that's what they'll bring me out for or whatever. Right. And it's like, it's kind of unfair to the tour content guy because, you don't have photos of it because you have video of it. You can't, it's really hard to wear all these hats at once, you know?
Exactly.
And with some of these guys, to some extent, they end up missing, obviously, you're going to miss half the show on photo and half the show on video.
Yeah.
And, or if you're required to wear too many hats, like a lot of these guys also have to do the social media, the meet and greets, the VIP packages, and, the quality of all of it starts to sacrifice when they're spread so thin because you can only do a mediocre job at 10 things. You can't do an excellent job at 10 things at once when you're spread that thin. I give credit to the guys that are doing it because I don't know how in your mind you switch from photo to video, or I guess if you know the show and the tour well enough, you kind of can predict moments and know what's going to happen.
And there's requests, there are requests, of like, this could probably be a great video moment. Let's get video of it tonight. We'll do photos of it tomorrow night, which is kind of cool about concert and touring. It's like, if you miss it tonight,
you have more than one chance.
Tomorrow.
Right.
It's not like a wedding.
Right. Right. And anything I shoot, even if it's an award show or whatever, I'll always watch rehearsals. And take notes on if it's an award show, I take notes on the show rundown. If it's a concert tour, like I don't know if you do this, but like on the Eras tour, I have the same set list I had since the first night. And it's constantly evolving, and I'm making notes about pyro and cryo and where she's entering or where she's exiting and where the flames are, and what's a good time to go up to the 300 section, what's a good time to go out in the crowd because the stage is so high and she's so close, you're looking up the nose, what's a good moment to get fans' hands in the air making hearts, or so I've got a big messy kind of master set list that's constantly evolving and I'm taking notes on, so that I know for the next show, as a reminder, you missed that shot, here's where you need to be, kind of thing.
It's really funny. I have to show you on my phone. It's because you say like the whole set list thing. What I did, I've literally would screenshot every set list in my phone and put it I don't know why they're not showing up.
Oh, you'd put it as your home screen.
I put it as my home screen. Yeah. So I'm like, okay,
so you just look down
cool.
at your phone.
It's like there's the Carrie Summer run through and and all this. So it's like I'll just like pop it here, and then I could just be like, oh, okay, cool. There's a set list.
That's a great way to do it.
So I don't have to look it up.
Or use a flashlight on a paper liner.
Exactly. But no, you're right. Because like a couple of times last year, I was hired to do some one-offs, and so I would get in touch with production, and just be like, hey, where are the moments? What are the big moments that you want? Where is the pyro hits? Where is all this? So
I always talk to the pyro guy, the fire guys, the lighting guys.
Because it's like you walk in, you got one shot to do one show. You got to nail it.
Absolutely.
And so you got to know those points.
And more often than not, that's me because I'm not touring. It's one-off type stuff.
Because in touring, you have tour rehearsals. You know when the hits are. You know where it's good. You already know everything that's happening on day one. But I could see that. Yeah. So now let's go to your favorite artist you've ever
Oh,
worked with?
favorite artist? I don't know. It's hard to say. I've gotten to work with some really iconic artists. I have great stories. I got to work with Prince a lot of times.
Nice.
And I'd have stories where, well, the first time I photographed him, he played at a secret show at Tower Records on Sunset, actually.
Gotcha.
And I remember being home, like in bed, and getting a call like, Prince wants to see your photos. Obviously I could have set up a link or a Dropbox, but instead it's like, okay, where do I meet him?
Right. Right.
And meeting at a bar on Sunset at 1 a.m., and sitting at a booth and going through photos with Prince. Or we've even got stories where he'd play 3 or 4 shows in a night and want to see photos, and the photo editor would kind of go back to his house. And it's like, I think on the Chappelle Show, even when the infamous, Prince would wake up and make pancakes and things like that. And that actually happened. Like, she stayed there over the whole night. He woke up in the morning, made pancakes, and then started going through photos after she sat there,
Wow.
overnight. Favorite tour I photographed, I have to say, I know we keep talking about Taylor Swift and the Eras tour, but it's, it's unlike any other. The production's insane. The length of the show's insane. Every single song is like a Super Bowl halftime show performance on its own.
Yeah.
I love watching Taylor, as she should, gets an enormous amount of credit for going nonstop for 3.5 hours with 9 costume changes, which are just 60-second breaks. But there's no intermission or anything. Other artists like The Dead or Dave Matthews, someone like that, might play 3.5 hours, but there might be an hour intermission, a 30-minute drum solo, a 30-minute guitar solo.
Yeah.
On this show, yes, it's Taylor, but it's also every dancer, backup singer, the entire band, the drummer, the guitar player. They're all nonstop for 3 hours and 40 minutes usually, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's an insane spectacle to see. Just to witness, I guess.
I want to see the show so bad. I saw the movie.
Yeah.
But it was funny because when I saw the movie, and I get it, why she did that, to put the movie out there. But when I watched it, I was like, man, I really want to see this live. Because I'm a concert guy.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to feel the music. I want to be in the crowd. I want to feel the energy. I feel like there wasn't that energy in a movie theater to watch a concert. I thought when I was going in to see the movie that there was going to be like a behind the scenes or if there was going to be a moment of her walking to the stage or anything like that. But it was literally a concert top to bottom.
And they have all that. So I'm sure at some point,
I'm sure. Oh,
but,
100%.
But that's interesting you say that, because the initial thought would be, why is anyone going to go see the live show and buy, spend money on tickets after they've seen the film? But I think the film actually inspired people to go go see the show.
Yeah. And I feel like, people, could go see the movie that didn't have maybe the money to go see the show, or they weren't in a radius of where they could
lucky
go
enough to get the tickets because they were so impossible,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. So at least people were able to, kind of see it.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I was like, man, now I really want to see this. Like, I want to feel that, because you know how it is. Concerts, it's a feel. It's the vibe of just the building and people just exiting their lives to go and be together for 3 hours. It's
very hard it's very hard to capture kind of the crowd's energy and the fans' energy in a concert film, and there's nothing quite like being there on the floor with surrounded by screaming fans, and it's very hard to capture that on video, I think. I also, like you mentioned, Chris Young, for example, I do love working with artists that I am friends with, and touring with and things like that. So obviously a lot of the Nashville guys, you mentioned FGL or Thomas Rhett, Luke Bryan, Morgan Wallen, a lot of these guys that I've worked with for years are great to work with, because as you mentioned, with knowing Carrie from the beginning of her career, a lot of these guys I've worked with for 9 years, and they were opening acts then, and now they're stadium acts, and I think having that friendship and trust with an artist goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. I feel, and with obviously we talk a lot about the concert stuff, but you do a lot of studio stuff too. A lot of album covers, a lot of single covers, all that. I mean,
so I when I moved here like 9 years ago, my goal was to kind of open a studio and do album covers for country artists. Up until that point, I'd primarily done event-based stuff, whether it was award shows, red carpets, parties, concert tours, all of that. And now I've had a studio 6 or 7 years here, and I've probably done 20 to 30 album covers at least.
So did you
like
do like portrait stuff prior?
Not
like,
much.
So did you kind of just like
honestly that was kind of
into that?
Yeah, it was kind of part of the reason I left LA. It's kind of when you get wrapped up in that world and you're booked every night, you're doing these events, you can't really focus necessarily on transforming your career. It's kind of like I had to move out of it and move here and reinvent myself as a photographer, I think.
Yeah. Do you think coming to Nashville is the best move?
I do. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
I feel the same too.
And in all fair, I still shoot in LA a ton, and we have a second place in LA, and I'm in LA a lot, but and I can go back there and get the good weather and the good sushi and everything else that we're lacking here.
Man, I miss the weather so much.
But for my career, I think moving to Nashville is the best thing I ever did. I mean, I think it would have been a long shot to think there's just so many photographers and so much production in LA
very
to
saturated
open a studio and do what I'm doing here in LA. There's just so much more competition. Saturation, like you said. There's so much more competition. Yeah.
I love Nashville. Everybody, it's a small family. I feel like there's just this little circle of just the people that have been here for 25 years and have been in the country music industry.
And people say, did you move there for a love of country music? And it's not so much the music, but it's the industry and it's the people and it's everyone from, there's no egos here. In LA, you can work with an artist 20 times and they still don't remember your name or at least act like they don't know you or remember your name. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But here, everyone from the artists to the makeup artists to the photographers or video guys to the security guys to the band themselves, like it's all just kind of a community and we're all friends. We're at an award show, I'm hanging out with the security guys and the bands just as much as I am the artists and vice versa. And I, in LA, I think I'd be less welcome to just be standing on the wall of a dressing room at the Oscars, doing fly on the wall documentary stuff like I am at the CMA Awards, for example.
Yeah. I feel like coming to Nashville is the best thing I think anybody could.
I mean, everyone says kind of if you've worked in the pop world or hip hop and all, like once you start working in country, you never want to go back because it's such a different world here, right?
Yeah. It's funny. The first artist I worked for or was it? No, it wasn't the first one. Faith Hill was the first country artist I worked for here, but I was still living in LA because I didn't move here until 2007. And it was summer of 2005. And I had gotten a phone call because Faith was managed by the same person that managed Keith Urban at the time. And I got a phone call because Keith wanted to have a content guy out there. And because it was going back to that whole AT&T thing, they wanted content and stuff like that. I'll never forget. I was in Newport Beach when I got the phone call, and I was with my girlfriend at the time, and they had offered me the job. I didn't know who Keith Urban was, and this was 2005. And I get off the phone and I turn to her. I'm like, I just got a job offer to go out on the road with Keith Urban. I'm like, who is this? And she goes, oh my God, you got to do it. You got to do it. So. But yeah, that was my path to Nashville, and I started working for him, and I'm like, you know what, I got nothing.
And he's such a great guy and treats everyone who he works with in his orbit so well. Yeah.
Man, I miss working for him.
Yeah.
I really do. It was really cool because the dude is so talented.
Yeah,
he's very. I don't even know the words. I mean, he's just so. He's great.
And I think it's interesting that because I did the Speed and Now, I did the last album cover, I did the Vegas residency, just his creative process, not just talented in terms of kind of performing and songwriting and things like that, but watching, that too, but also he's kind of in control of every aspect of his career, whether it's he's kind of his own creative director for this show, watching him at rehearsals and focusing on, how he should be lit and where he should be standing. And he cares about a lot of things that other artists might not put their hands in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That first show that I did with him when I got hired, I think it was like Bozeman, Montana or something. And I shot the show the first night. It was mostly video stuff. And I was like, what is happening? This was the Days Go By Keith Urban, back in the day. And I was like, man, this guy could play the guitar. He could sing. This crowd is insane.
He can play every instrument.
I'm like, I love this. This is cool. I'm like, this doesn't feel like country music.
Right.
It almost had kind of a rock vibe.
It does,
to it,
yeah.
you know?
And I tell people in LA, because there's not many rock bands. Like when we were growing up, we had the Foo Fighters and Nirvana, all the rock bands in the 90s, you know, and that doesn't really exist anymore.
I know.
So I tell people who think they dislike country music, guys in LA and things like that it's actually the closest thing to rock and roll.
Exactly. It's definitely become
on
that.
popular radio.
Yeah.
If you like a Keith or an Eric Church, or a lot of these guys are, closer to a Led Zeppelin style jammy rock act than anything you're going to hear on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there even rock radio? I mean, is there even?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know I did.
I know there's I go to the VMAs, for example, the MTV show, and there's not a guitar in the show, I mean, in the whole show. So
tell me about that.
Video music. So I've done the VMAs since 2001, I think. And kind of what I consider to be my breakthrough moment, or kind of put me on the map as a photographer, was the photo of Britney and Madonna kissing in 2003.
It's incredible. That is an iconic photo, dude.
Thank you.
Like that's pop culture, man.
So no one knew it was going to happen. No one even knew Britney was going to be in the performance or anything. It was the right place, right time, got the moment kind of thing. But it's definitely my most published photo. Incredible. And I don't even think I put it on my website or my portfolio for some reason, but I think it's kind of what most people know me by. Right. I don't know. Maybe it makes me look old.
Hey, we're all getting older.
That was 22 years ago, and right. The other tour photographers are 22.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. It's so true. Vegas.
Yeah,
Vegas.
So we've both spent a lot of time in Vegas. We've traded stories as to how to get out of these casinos and where to get tacos and things like that. Because the hardest thing in Vegas is, you stay in the casino, in the hotels in the building where the show is, and if you get wrapped up in it, you can never see daylight for the duration of your time there.
I know.
But I work there a lot because so many artists are doing these residencies. I don't. Like, you've spent extended periods of time in Vegas. I go for opening weekends, or rehearsals and opening shows. But.
Yeah, we did when we started with Carrie, because Carrie was the first one in the Resorts World Theater, and when we went in, that's when Celine had pulled out because I don't know the reasons why, but she had pulled out. So Carrie was now the first artist to go in there. So we were able to have, or Carrie was able to have, production rehearsals and stuff like that in there weeks in advance. So when we first went out there, I think I was out there for like 30 days in a row at Resorts World. And I think like when I used to go to Vegas, I always felt like 3 days was so long in Vegas, and I was there for 30 days. Yeah. And now
it's different too when you're not getting drunk every night and like gambling.
When you're working,
when
you're working, you have something to do every single day. Right. It's completely different. But there was a moment that we figured out that a lot of us hadn't gone outside in almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like we didn't even step outside.
See, I always tell people, make an effort to I'll just get outside and walk a mile, or walk around the block or do something just to get some exercise and fresh air and stuff, or else that's what ends up.
And then I learned I do that now every morning in Vegas. Yeah, I'll go walk down and take a lap around the building, and
or just around the pool. They've got a track or something like that usually, just to get outside and get exercise. But it is a bizarre. There's the same 3 restaurants in the it's just so much work to leave and go anywhere else,
But the great thing about Resorts World is you got the taco place right across the street, then you got the Indian place over there, and then you've got the Mexican place behind, where the strip club is. Kind of funny, and it's apparently some of the best Mexican food in Vegas. So you've got all that back there, and then you've got like the world's biggest cannabis dispensary or whatever, and like when you're driving by it in a cab, you can smell it from inside the car. I know. But it was funny after it. We go back again in March, and as of right now, we're filming this here in January. But I've stayed at Resorts World 122 nights.
Jesus. Do you get your Hilton Honors points?
No.
Because they book it, you don't get your own. Wow.
Can you imagine if I got 122 nights on Hilton?
That's kind of one of the perks of this job is being able to go on vacation on points.
Yeah, that's another
airline
thing.
Miles.
That is one big thing for these people that are starting in this. Get your rewards cards.
Yeah.
You get all your Hilton, get all your airlines, because the artist, and they pay for your trips, they pay for your travel, and you get the benefits.
And the funny thing is, everyone dreams of flying private, loves flying private, but on the other hand, when you fly private, you don't get airline miles.
Exactly.
So sometimes it's nice to just fly Delta, and then when you and your wife want to go to Paris over the summer, you don't have to, you have enough points to cover it.
I know. The Southwest points I have, Jesus.
Everyone has a companion passes on Southwest.
Yeah, exactly. My wife's a companion pass on Southwest, so it's like
she can come anywhere for $5.
Yeah, so it's like if I'm going to Vegas, she could come out to Vegas for $5. Exactly.
Right.
So that is a huge thing for sure for like these younger people. If you're traveling a lot, definitely get those rewards points for sure.
Right. And tie your credit card to like whatever it is.
Yeah.
Be loyal to one brand or whatever, and then every vacation's paid for, I guess, from then on, unless you're in the situation you're in at Resorts World.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I wish I could get those points on that. But back to the Vegas thing.
Yeah.
Obviously you did the Katy Perry stuff there.
Yeah.
What a show, man. I saw it. I was in Vegas for something else, and Kyle Whalum, bass player. You know Kyle, probably.
No, I don't think I do. Yeah.
Katie's bass player. He's great dude, but he got me tickets to go see the show. And
it's amazing.
Like, oh man.
And that theater is so fun to shoot at because the stage is like waist high. There's great crowd control. So you can just like walk straight up to the, Bridgestone Arena. You couldn't just like walk straight up to the stage through the crowd like that, like you can there.
Yeah.
And within 6 seconds, you can be at the back of the crowd too. I mean, you can just run straight back. So I'm just constantly running back and forth, running around to the other side. So, to intentionally not block people, hopefully.
It's a beautiful theater. They did it right. I feel like, because I heard something that they wanted to keep it so kind of compressed to where the stage, and there's only like the furthest seat away from the theaters or from the stage is only like 150 feet or something.
And I did Luke Bryan's residency, and he had kind of an elevated bridge. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
So that went up to the balcony. So, for a few songs, I would go up to the balcony to shoot, and then no one would know I am there. And then suddenly a bridge comes out and lifts up there. And then
I never saw that.
Luke's eye level with the whole balcony up on top there.
I always saw it when I was there, because they kept it up there. Yeah, they kept it there. But I never saw like any of the footage or anything of what it did. But that Katy show was incredible.
Yeah,
I loved it because
it was kind of like Toy Story come to life or something, with these massive
she's so quirky anyway.
And,
it's like that whole show kind of defined what she is.
So Katie's someone, when I was in LA for about 6 years, she was very loyal to me. I think I did 6 music videos, meaning shooting the stills and single covers on the music videos. She's brought me to London to do the same. I've done all of her concert tours of the last. I started photographing Katy Perry on Warped Tour.
Oh, wow.
She was a side stage act on Warped Tour.
That's wild.
So I've known her since she was very young and very new, kind of like we talk about getting in with artists before they're popular. That was before I Kissed a Girl. And I've maintained a friendship with her ever since, all the way up until now, the play residency in Vegas, just last year or whatever. She still brings me out for this stuff.
Yeah.
So
the photographs that I've seen coming out of it from you were incredible.
Thank you.
Does she have her own photographer, videographer, or anything out there?
She does, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a couple duo that kind of do photo and video.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But usually, even if they have that, especially because of the Getty piece, which Getty syndicates my photos to media worldwide, and that's something that those photographers can't provide. So for the opening show or the first night of the residency or something, is when I'm usually brought out to shoot. And then, often they don't want to, often artists don't credential any press, honestly. I don't think Katy allowed any press or any photographers. So she would bring me and Kevin Mazur. I don't know if you know Kevin. Both of us shot the first show, and then they can just refer everyone to Getty so that they don't need to worry about, 15 press photographers taking crappy photos who don't care about how the artist looks in the picture. They trust us. They do see the photos and get eyes on them and often approve what gets released and what goes out. But they know that if we're to choose on our own and make our own selects and put the photos out, we're going to put out flattering photos. And they can't say that of most photographers because, if a photographer gets a photo of Katy looking stupid, he's going to make money on sell it to a tabloid or something. They can trust that we're not going to do that.
Yeah. Tell me, this is something that I've always wanted to know too, because I've never done this, and this could be cool for, aspiring photographers to know this, but what is the whole Getty flow? Like what is that? Like, I mean, it's obviously you get hired by Getty to do photos. Explain that, because I know a lot of people don't really kind of know what that is all about.
Sure. So Getty's kind of the world's biggest distribution network for photography. They've got subscribers all over the world. They have feeds set up so that the second you upload a photo to Getty's server, it automatically goes into these feeds, into the servers of, thousands of publications worldwide. I don't know what the number is, but Getty, they do have staff photographers full time. They have Jason Kempen here in Nashville. You probably know, I know you know Jason. Yeah. Jason, and staff photographers in every city. And then and I was on staff for a dozen years as well. But I have an exclusive kind of syndication deal with them still.
Right.
And that's something I have that not every photographer in town has. So if an artist wants to hire a photographer to distribute photos to media, I have that exclusive deal with Getty, so I can do that.
Yeah.
It's a lot tougher to come in as a newer photographer who doesn't have a contract with Getty and try and get
right.
signed up and get the photos distributed. Getty also does just hire photographers to cover shows and things like that. It's not all like myself. There's kind of two scenarios. There's someone like me or Kevin, who I mentioned, who get hired by the artists and Getty distributes the photos. Or a lot of artists go to Getty to hire a photographer to shoot a show.
Right.
We don't know anyone in Vegas. Who do you have? And then they hire Getty's local Vegas photographer to shoot the opening of the show, so that they don't need to travel someone in or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I got an email today about a celebrity appearance at Target or something in Nashville, and just wanting to hire a Getty photographer to photograph the installation or whatever.
Gotcha.
So it goes both ways. I mean, a lot of photographers bring the work to Getty to distribute, and more often than not, publicists and PR firms, things like that, are going to Getty to hire Getty to send a photographer out to the show or event or whatever they're
Is
having.
there like a requirement that Getty kind of looks for to bring in like a new photographer or anything like that? I mean, for these people that are coming up into this business, if they wanted to become a Getty photographer, is there like a criteria or anything?
Well, of course, I'm sure it starts with portfolio reviews and quality of work and standards in that sense. Your reputation is a huge thing. Relationships you have. You can't just send anyone into most of these scenarios and expect them to get the types of pictures we're talking about. So experience, relationships, the work, obviously. And then a lot of it has to do with, I always, once again, it comes back to the work's part of it, but you and your personality and how you carry yourself and how professional you are is a huge piece of it too, because you're now there representing Getty, which is a massive publicly traded corporation, and I don't think just anyone can be a representative of a brand like that. So the photography is part of it, but how professional you are, how you handle yourself, how you work with clients, because you're dealing with Getty's clients, and a representative from Getty isn't necessarily there, so they need to trust that you, Jeff, if you're, I mentioned Target today, for example, if you're with corporate clients from Target and they're corporate clients of Getty's, not yours, and no one from Getty's there, it's just you, you're there representing this brand that has that has a great reputation and is a massive publicly traded company, and you need to represent them well, right, and professionally. And of course, have to deliver on the photos. As I always say, of course, the photography has to be there. You have to be talented, but these other things play a huge part in it.
Because I feel like, there's probably some people, watching this going, I could care less about concert photography, but I don't want to be a red carpet guy. You just never know. You know, so it's like kind of having that information is cool too, to know, how to kind of get into that, or what obviously you got to be a great person. You got to do great work. That's huge, anyway.
I think it's very hard to throw just kind of anybody who's inexperienced into any of these scenarios. We've talked to death about concerts and what that industry is like, but it could be the same for, I mentioned award shows. there's a reason there's only like 5 of us that are roaming around shooting like all the award shows, you know?
Yeah.
And it's because it's the same camera crews. We know the camera guys, we know the Steadicam guys, we know the stage managers, we know the security, and they know that we know what we're doing and we're not going to get in the way. And you hire some new photographer and throw them into that situation.
Yeah.
The Steadicam guy during a live show is running backwards and they're not paying attention, and the camera's up to their face, and the Steadicam guy trips over them, and it's on live TV, and this stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And in red carpets, you know, it's all similar. It's the same thing. It's the same photographers. You know, you go to any movie premiere in LA, it might be a different movie, a different location, a different movie studio, but it's the same photographers, the same publicists, the same security guards, the same talent, and just like we talk about with Nashville and the community here, that's its own separate community. And it's very hard to just throw someone who doesn't know what they're doing into that situation and expect them to.
Yeah, exactly.
So experience, I'd assume, really falls into this.
Yeah. So to wrap up a little bit, we're already past an hour and a half. It was more than an hour and a half already.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, right?
Man. I know, right? I love it. So this is one thing that I've asked everybody, and I think I kind of probably will know the answer to this now that we've talked a lot about gear.
Oh,
if you were to go out on the road for a weekend and you were to bring one camera and one lens, what would it be for the full weekend? You can't.
It would be my Leica Q3 with the fixed 28 1.7 lens, because I feel like that it requires you to be creative, you know, because with a fixed 28, you've got to you've got to figure it out yourself, right? And it requires you to figure out how to make cool creative photos without a 70 to 200 and a 24 to 70 lens, you know. So that's an easy answer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And obviously I would use the same camera backstage on the bus. It's kind of something I can use start to finish.
And it's discreet too.
That's the best part.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How about you?
So
I think I know the answer to this too.
I would, my choice would be a Canon R5 and the 24 to 70.
Not the 28 to 70.
No, because the reason why is because video. The 28 to 70 is in IS. So 24 to 70 is, right?
Oh, maybe. You might be right. Yeah.
So with video,
there's no stabilizer.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
So
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so that's because obviously doing video and then doing photos, you know, I feel like that's just kind of the most diverse lens for me.
Could you shoot video at like f2 with that lens?
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. And it looks amazing.
And the R5 will track the focus and you don't need to. Wow.
Yeah, but it's more jittery than the 24 to 70, 2.8, you know, but that would be my choice just because I go back and forth between photo and video all the time.
On the same camera?
Yeah.
You never like have the still camera here and the video?
No,
like
I've got the R5 set up where I hit the one button and man, I'm right into video.
So any card that's in there, any SD card will have both video and still photo files on it.
And then I separate them in my organization at the end of the night.
At the end, yeah. And are you shooting raw files for photo?
Yeah.
That's another, not everyone does.
Yeah.
So,
and shooting 4K, everything.
Yeah.
You know, future-proof it.
Right.
You know, and so there's a lot of hard drives.
Right.
There's a lot of terabytes of footage.
Well, and I need to focus on the file size. We talk so much about the music stuff, but I also do key art. You know, we mentioned the Taylor Swift one for the Eras tour, but I do key art for film and TV, and often this stuff is on a billboard or the side of a building on Sunset Boulevard or something, you know. So that's kind of where the medium format comes into play, and it's a 300 megabyte TIFF file, so they can have the ability to do that.
What are you using medium format?
It's a phase 1 camera, which is basically a Mamiya 645. They bought Mamiya, so it's that body, that traditional medium format body with the digital back on it.
Yeah. Wow. Do you own it?
I do. Yeah. Oh, man. I own the 100 megapixel. There is a 150 megapixel that I don't think I need that much of a file size. I think 100 is enough, especially for hard drive storage and archiving. These files are so massive, you know.
So like the Taylor thing though, that was just when you were shooting out on the road.
That was,
That was the medium format.
No.
Oh,
Canon
okay.
R5.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The whole, this is interesting. If we have 2 minutes to talk about equipment, it's kind of interesting that on the tour now, you know, because the stage is so massive, I'll use the R5 in this 100 to 500 lens, which a few years ago, even on the last tour or the 1989 tour, if you had to shoot with a 400, it'd be on a tripod and you'd be at the back of the room or whatever. Now I'm carrying around and hand holding a 100 to 500 millimeter lens. The stage is overhead high, so I'm holding it over my head with the live screen tipped down. And I mean, even just 2-3 years ago, the thought of being able to hold a 500 millimeter lens over your head and shoot on live view would be completely unheard of, right?
Yeah.
It would be on a tripod at the back of the room, and the thing would be like 3 feet long and 20 pounds.
Yeah.
And now it's on one shoulder, just like the 28 to 70 is.
Yeah.
And I'm not even looking through the viewfinder half the time. The stage is so big, and you don't want to look. I don't like looking up the nose of artists.
Right.
That's not very flattering.
Yeah.
So I'm holding it up above my head, and the thought of doing that just a couple of years ago was unheard of. So, I mean, the advancement in Canon's technology has kind of allowed for this.
That's what Katie Koss was talking about, how she could now put her hands up and have the thing flip down. Where before, like on a 5D Mark IV, you couldn't do that. It's like you're up there, you can't even see what's up there,
Or you'd stand on the barricade and block a bunch of fans and piss them off.
Oh man, I piss them off all the time because I'm 6'2", and I'm like,
well, something I always do. I try and be friendly with people. I try and introduce myself, let them know what I'm doing. I might pop up here on the barricade, but just so you know, I'm not going to camp out there. Just give me 30 seconds.
Exactly.
I'm sorry you'll be blocked, but I'll be out of your way within a minute or a song or whatever it is.
You get those fans that sit there and go, "Are you going to be there the whole night?"
Right.
Like, no, I'm only here for a second. I'm out.
Sometimes I'll hand out, I'll get guitar picks and give them to those fans. Or if something gets tossed out, I'll turn around and give it to the person I've been blocking, because they've paid good money for these seats.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why a lot of these artists don't want photographers in the barricade anymore, because they're blocking, these fans who have paid all this money.
Exactly. I remember I got cussed out by a guy at Stagecoach when I was shooting Carrie.
Drunk country fans, I'm sure.
He was pissed because I was down there. But
and he's been there since noon, staking out his spot, right?
Exactly. And I get it. I totally get it, because if I was in his position, I probably would be too. But I gotta kind of get my work done.
Well, and then if you explain it, it's like,
I'm not
these are the people that follow them on Instagram, and we're taking the pictures for these fans. They're the ones that are reposting them on Instagram and everything. So it's like, if you want these photos to exist, I have to do my job to some extent, or there is no photo for you to repost from tonight's show.
Just give me 30 seconds, dude.
Right.
I'll be out. I promise.
Right. Just be a nice guy.
Exactly.
Just don't be a jerk. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. So any advice? Any advice you'd want to,
Well, in talking about everything we've talked about and touring and everything, what I think is becoming abundantly clear is the concept of someone like me who just does still photography is becoming completely obsolete. And if you want to work around touring and live music and stuff, you mentioned David Bergman. He's maybe the only tour photographer I can think of that just does still photography. Everyone else, like yourself, has to do video and photo, edit both. And a lot of the guys, like I said, even if it's a newer act or whatever, the tour content guy's also running the social media himself, updating that, doing the meet and greet. I mean, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades. I would not advise that you go down the path of hoping to tour with an artist and just be a still photographer. I mean, learn video and learn it quick. I also think still photography could be obsolete, like in our lifetime even, if you look at what's consumed on social media, the stats are overwhelmingly, leaning towards motion, not still pictures. Even if you go to Spotify or any of this now, it's not even like a still album cover. Right. It's like small little
video clips.
3-second video clips and things like that as the covers on Spotify. So even in that world, still photography could become obsolete,
Yeah. I think like, I remember hearing a story about a photographer, videographer out on the road with an artist, and then I found out that like he doesn't edit. But it's like, you gotta edit though too. If you're doing video, you gotta know how to edit, right? I mean, if you're gonna do recaps and stuff, I mean, I feel like if you want to be a tour photographer,
that's part of it. I mean, that's half the job, right? Is putting that together at the end of the night.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's important. Is people have to learn, obviously, to do photos, do video, and edit.
I actually, in the photography world, touring is the only time I do edit my pictures.
I could see that.
Yeah, because everything else I'm doing, that stuff needs to be out. Well, it either needs to be out in real time, in which case I have an editor there who we mentioned tethering to or running cards to get the photos out. Or if it's in a studio setting, I have a digital tech. I'm tethered to his computer, and he's managing the files and everything. And then the label down the line has an art director who's doing the editing and photoshopping and retouching.
So tell me this: what's your workflow when you're out on the road? Like
when I'm on the road, I do probably what you do. At the end of the show, I eat my food, I sit on the bus, maybe have a glass of wine, and sit there at the computer and do exactly what I do. The same thing. I make. I don't know how many selects. It's different for each artist, but it's not an overwhelming amount. They don't usually expect 150 or 200 photos. It's more like 40 maybe. Yeah. I shoot RAWs and I use Capture One to process them out into JPEGs because Capture One's what we use in the studio, and that's what I'm used to.
Do you ever use Lightroom at all?
Never have. No.
Gotcha.
And I throw them and I put them on a Dropbox, and it's like you said, your job's not over until the client has received the deliverables.
Exactly.
So there's no going out and partying or getting drunk with the artist, or it's just straight to the back of the bus and sit at the table and set up the computer and work for 2 hours.
Yeah. It's fun, isn't it?
It is.
We have a great job.
It is actually. Yeah, it is. I can't do it like you do it though. I can't leave for 3 months at a time.
Right. Right.
I've got a family, a wife, kids. I leave for 3 days at a time. I can't do it like you do, but it is a ton of fun.
Do you ever find yourself in a moment where you're just like, man, this is awesome?
I'm trying to allow myself to take a step back and look at it that way more than I usually do, because you get so wrapped up in it and stressed about a million things, and then look at different people with different types of jobs, from hospital or medical workers to police officers to plumbers and electricians. And it's like, I have a very, we have it made pretty well here, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's great because, we obviously work in kind of this entertainment, or we do work in this entertainment business. And it's like, I always think to myself, I'm like, there's probably 1,000 people that want my job. I get DMs all the time. How do I get your job?
Yeah.
How do I get this? How do I do this? Wow. Why? How? All this.
Same. Yeah.
So it's like, I sit there and think to myself, I'm like, man, we're so lucky to be able to work with the artists that we do, because in 50 years from now, we're probably all not going to be, we're getting older, you know, and stuff like that. And these are images that people are going to look at in 50 years and go, man, those are iconic artists, and these were the people that were shooting them.
Even just sharing stories, we take it for granted, but you and I in this conversation are talking about being in a dressing room with Carrie Underwood or Keith Urban or Prince or, whoever, Britney Spears or Taylor Swift, and 99.999% of the population doesn't do that.
Doesn't do it.
And once in a while, we probably get burnt out and complain about our jobs, but I think we need to take a step back and realize how sweet they actually are.
Time.
Good.
All the time. Because there's time we do get burnt out.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens with all creators. It happens with artists. Artists get burnt out on writing.
I'm sure you get burnt out on staying in Vegas for 30 days. You can, and you have to realize that you have one of the most awesome jobs in the world, but you're still going to complain about it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the thing that really kind of brings me back to life and to the ground on that is when I do get those DMs of people saying, how do I get your job?
Right.
Knowing like, wow, I'm lucky, to be able to do this, that I am the one guy that gets to shoot these artists, you know? So I'm very
Don't take
lucky.
it for granted.
Never take it for
granted.
Never,
Absolutely.
Never. Well, dude, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. This is fun. 2 hours flew
great.
by like,
I know, right?
we're at what? Feels like we were here for 5 minutes.
I know. We're at an hour and 50 minutes, and man,
does anyone want to listen to us for that long?
I know, right? I think I'll tell you what, all these stories, I think people are really going to love. I think people are going to love this podcast.
I'm going to listen to it.
Yeah.
I want to hear compare what how everyone else answered these questions, right?
Well, thank you, John Shearer.
Thank you for having me.
Best, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The respect is mutual.
Thank you, man.
That's a wrap. Thanks for having me.